Steve McQueen doubted Sammy Davis Jr. could handle serious dramatic acting, so he challenged him to an impromptu scene that would test his skills. Sammy's response was so powerful it left McQueen speechless and led to a collaboration that surprised everyone. It was October 3, 1968, and the Paramount Studios lot was buzzing with the controlled chaos that marked a major film production. Steve McQueen was in the middle of shooting Bullet, the movie that would cement his status as the undisputed king of cool and redefine action cinema for generations. The film's groundbreaking car chase sequences and McQueen's understated, intense performance style were creating exactly the kind of cinema that Hollywood executives were calling the future of the industry. McQueen had earned his reputation not just through his on-screen presence, but through his commitment to authenticity in every role he took. He did his own stunts, insisted on realistic dialogue, and had little patience for what he considered the artificial elements of traditional Hollywood entertainment. He was known for his directness, his competitive nature, and his ability to see through pretense of any kind. That particular afternoon, McQueen was taking a break between setups when he noticed a commotion near the studio commissary. Sammy Davis Jr. had arrived on the lot to visit a friend who was working on another production, and as always happened when Sammy appeared anywhere, a small crowd had gathered to witness his effortless charm and natural charisma. McQueen watched from a distance as Sammy entertained the group with impressions, jokes, and the kind of spontaneous performance that made him one of the most beloved entertainers in America. But instead of being impressed, McQueen found himself slightly irritated by what he saw as typical show business flash. "Look at that," McQueen muttered to his co-star Robert Vaughn, who was standing nearby. "All song and dance, all entertainment. But could he handle a real dramatic scene? Could he strip away all that razzle-dazzle and actually act?" Vaughn, who had worked extensively in both film and television, raised an eyebrow. "Steve, that's Sammy Davis Jr. you're talking about. The man's been performing since he was a child, and he's done some serious dramatic work. I wouldn't underestimate him." "I've seen his movies," McQueen replied, dismissively. "Ocean's 11, Sergeant's 3. It's all just him being Sammy Davis Jr. in different costumes. That's not acting, that's just being a personality. Real acting is about truth, about stripping away everything false and finding something real underneath." McQueen's philosophy of acting was deeply personal and hard-earned. He had come from a difficult background, spending time in reform school and struggling with various jobs before finding his way into acting through the neighborhood playhouse and method acting techniques. His approach to performance was based on emotional authenticity and psychological realism, and he had little respect for what he considered superficial entertainment. "You know what?" McQueen said suddenly, his competitive instincts taking over. "I'd like to see how Mr. Song and Dance would handle a real dramatic scene, something with meat on it, something that requires actual acting instead of just charm." Before Vaughn could respond, McQueen was walking toward the group surrounding Sammy. As he approached, the conversation naturally shifted to include the star of the movie being filmed on that very lot. "Steve McQueen," Sammy said warmly, extending his hand as McQueen approached. "It's great to finally meet you. I've been following your work, The Great Escape, The Cincinnati Kid. You're doing some really interesting stuff." McQueen shook Sammy's hand, noting the genuine respect in the entertainer's voice. Despite his skepticism about Sammy's acting abilities, he had to acknowledge the man's professionalism and grace. "Thanks," McQueen replied. "I appreciate that. I've seen some of your work too." There was a slight edge to his tone that Sammy, with his years of experience reading audiences and situations, immediately picked up on. Something in McQueen's demeanor suggested this wasn't going to be a typical friendly Hollywood introduction. "You know, Sammy," McQueen continued, "I was just discussing the difference between entertaining and acting, between performing for an audience and finding truth in a character. I'm curious, how do you see that distinction?" The question was loaded, and everyone in the group could sense it. McQueen wasn't just making conversation, he was issuing a challenge. Sammy, for his part, had encountered this kind of skepticism before from actors who saw his entertainment background as somehow less legitimate than their dramatic training. "Well," Sammy replied thoughtfully, "I think all good acting starts with truth. Whether it's in a comedy, a musical, or a drama. The audience can always tell when a performer is being genuine and when they're just going through the motions. The techniques might be different, but the core requirement is the same. You have to find something real to hold on to." McQueen nodded slowly, but his expression remained skeptical. "That's a good theory. But theory and practice are two different things. It's easy to talk about truth and authenticity. It's harder to actually demonstrate it when you're stripped of all the props and costumes and musical numbers." The challenge was now explicit, and Sammy felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came when his abilities were being questioned. He had spent his entire career proving himself in new arenas, and he wasn't about to back down from Steve McQueen's implicit dare. "Are you suggesting we put that to the test?" Sammy asked quietly. McQueen smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. It was the smile of a competitor who had just maneuvered his opponent into exactly the position he wanted. "As a matter of fact, I am. There's an empty soundstage about 200 yards from here. No audience, no lights, no costumes, just 2 actors and a scene. You interested?" The group around them had grown quiet, sensing that they were witnessing the beginning of something significant. Word was already beginning to spread through the lot that Steve McQueen and Sammy Davis Jr. were about to have some kind of showdown. "I'm interested," Sammy replied. "What did you have in mind?" "Something from The Hustler," McQueen said, referencing the 1961 film that had showcased Paul Newman's dramatic range. "The scene where Fast Eddie explains why he plays pool. It's all about a man revealing the core of who he is. No hiding behind charm or personality. Just raw truth." Sammy nodded slowly. He knew the scene McQueen was referring to. It was one of the most emotionally demanding monologues in contemporary American cinema, requiring the actor to strip away all pretense and reveal genuine vulnerability. "And what would you be doing during this scene?" Sammy asked. "I'll be your scene partner. I'll feed you the lines, create the reactions you need. But this isn't about me. This is about whether you can handle the emotional demands of serious dramatic acting." Within 20 minutes, word had spread throughout the studio that something unprecedented was happening on Soundstage 7. Directors, producers, and actors from various productions began quietly making their way to witness what people were already calling the challenge. The soundstage was indeed empty. Just a vast, echoing space with concrete floors and high ceilings. Someone had brought in 2 simple chairs and positioned them in the center of the stage. The lighting was harsh and unflattering, exactly the kind of environment that would reveal any artifice or pretense. McQueen and Sammy took their positions, with a small group of industry professionals forming a respectful semicircle around them. The atmosphere was tense but focused, like the moment before a prize fight. "You ready?" McQueen asked. Sammy nodded, and McQueen began the scene that would lead into the monologue. He played the role of the skeptical listener, the character who doubted Fast Eddie's motivations and pushed him to reveal his true nature. For the first few exchanges, Sammy seemed to be finding his footing, adapting to the stark environment and the intensity of McQueen's approach. But as the scene progressed and approached the emotional climax, something remarkable began to happen. Sammy stopped being Sammy Davis Jr., the entertainer. He stopped being the man who had charmed millions with his smile and his songs. Instead, he became someone else entirely, a broken, desperate man who was forced to confront the ugly truths about himself and his motivations. When he reached the heart of the monologue, the moment where Fast Eddie admits that he plays pool, not for money or fame, but because it's the only thing that makes him feel alive, Sammy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The showman's polish was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate and completely authentic. "I got a talent," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had built his entire identity around a skill that both elevated and trapped him. "I got a talent that goes all the way down to the bottom of my soul, and when I put my hand on a pool cue, when I line up that shot, for that moment, everything else disappears. All the pain, all the doubt, all the questions about who I am and what I'm worth, none of that matters. For that moment, I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. The silence in the soundstage was complete. McQueen, who had planned to push and challenge Sammy throughout the scene, found himself genuinely moved by the performance he was witnessing. This wasn't entertainment. This was emotional excavation of the highest order. As Sammy continued the monologue, it became clear that he wasn't just reciting lines from The Hustler. He was drawing on his own experiences as a performer, his own relationship with his talent, his own understanding of what it meant to find identity and worth through artistic ability. But then the moment passes, Sammy continued, his voice now filled with the resignation of someone who understood the temporary nature of transcendence. The shot is made or missed. The game ends, and I'm back to being just another guy who's trying to figure out why he does what he does and whether any of it means anything at all. When the monologue ended, the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. McQueen, who had entered the scene as a skeptical challenger, found himself staring at Sammy with genuine amazement and respect. "Jesus," McQueen said finally, his voice barely audible. That was the real thing." Sammy, still partially lost in the emotional space he had accessed for the scene, looked up at McQueen with eyes that showed both exhaustion and vulnerability. "You wanted to see if I could act without the razzle-dazzle," Sammy said quietly. "The truth is, Steve, sometimes the razzle-dazzle is what keeps us from having to go to places like that too often. But when the role demands it, when the story requires it, I can go there. We all can, if we're willing to pay the price." McQueen stood up and extended his hand to Sammy. But this time it wasn't a formal Hollywood greeting. It was the gesture of one professional acknowledging another's mastery. "I owe you an apology," McQueen said. "I made assumptions about your work based on my own prejudices. What you just did was as good as anything I've seen from actors who've studied method technique for years." "Thank you," Sammy replied, accepting the handshake. "But you don't owe me anything. You challenged me to be better than I thought I could be in that moment. That's what good scene partners do for each other." The small audience that had gathered began to disperse, but the conversations that followed would continue for years. People who witnessed the challenge would describe it as one of the most powerful displays of acting they had ever seen, not because it took place on a movie screen, but because it was so immediate and authentic. More importantly, the encounter marked the beginning of an unlikely but genuine friendship between two men who had initially misjudged each other. McQueen gained a deep respect for Sammy's range and emotional depth, while Sammy appreciated McQueen's commitment to authenticity and his willingness to admit when he was wrong. In the weeks that followed, McQueen began advocating for Sammy to be considered for more serious dramatic roles. He used his influence to recommend Sammy for projects that would challenge him as an actor rather than simply showcase his entertainment skills. "That man can act," McQueen told directors and producers throughout Hollywood. "I mean, really act. Not just perform. He's got depths that most people never get to see because they're so focused on the singing and dancing. But the depths are there, and they're real." The friendship that developed between McQueen and Sammy surprised many in Hollywood, but it was based on mutual respect and a shared understanding of what it meant to be completely committed to their craft. They began spending time together, outside of work, with McQueen teaching Sammy about motorcycles and cars, while Sammy shared insights about performance and connecting with audiences. Years later, when McQueen was asked about the most impressive acting he had ever witnessed, he would always mention that afternoon on Soundstage 7. "I've worked with some of the greatest actors of my generation," McQueen said in a 1974 interview. "But I've never seen anyone access such genuine emotion so quickly and completely as Sammy did that day. It reminded me that great acting isn't about technique or training. It's about being brave enough to show people who you really are underneath everything else." For Sammy, the experience reinforced his belief that all performance, whether in a nightclub or on a movie set, required the same fundamental honesty and emotional courage. Steve taught me that day that respect has to be earned, not just given, Sammy reflected. But he also showed me that when you earn it honestly, it creates something valuable, not just recognition, but real connection between artists who understand what it takes to do this work at the highest level. The story of Steve McQueen's challenge to Sammy Davis Jr. became legendary in Hollywood, not just because of the dramatic confrontation, but because of what it revealed about both men's character and their commitment to their craft. It was a reminder that true artistry could emerge from the most unexpected circumstances, and that the willingness to be challenged could lead to both personal growth and lasting professional relationships. If this incredible story of professional challenge, artistic courage, and the unexpected friendships that can emerge when artists push each other to be their best inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to remember that our greatest growth often comes when we're willing to step outside our comfort zones and prove ourselves in new ways. Have you ever been challenged to demonstrate your abilities in an unexpected context? How did that experience change your understanding of your own capabilities? Let us know in the comments about the moments when someone pushed you to be better than you thought you could be. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about the professional encounters that forge lasting respect and friendship.